AAR brings you standard forms. Below is a list of AAR's forms, accompanied by a short description. A sample of each form can be found by clicking on the name of the form below. Addendum, used to add additional terms to an existing contract or when there is not sufficient room on a purchase contract to include all the terms being offered. Rev. 693, Additional Clause Addendum, a compilation of the most commonly used contract clauses. Agents can print out this form, check the box next to the clause that applies, and attach it to the purchase contract. Rev. 217, Additional Compensation Agreement, used by an agent to disclose any additional compensation they may receive as a result of a transaction. Rev. 0505, Affidavit of Disclosure, pursuant to ARS. 33-422, a seller of 5 or fewer parcels of land other than subdivided land in an unincorporated area of a county, and any subsequent seller of such a parcel shall furnish a written affidavit of disclosure in substantially the same form set forth in the statute to the buyer at least 7 days before the transfer of the property. Rev. 2011, Agreement Notice, pursuant to the Short Sale Addendum, for use in conjunction with the AAR Short Sale Addendum. In a short sale transaction utilizing the AAR Short Sale Addendum, the contract is contingent upon an agreement between the seller and seller's creditors to sell the premises for less than the loan amount. If the seller and seller's creditors enter into a short sale agreement, the seller is obligated to immediately deliver a written agreement notice to the buyer. 212. Application for occupancy, for help in gathering the information necessary to decide whether a prospective tenant meets the occupancy qualifications. Rev. 0213. Appraisal Contingency Notice. If used with the residential resale real estate purchase contract, this form allows the buyer the opportunity to continue or not continue with the purchase of a home when the property fails to appraise for at least the purchase price. Assumption Carryback Addendum provides for financing in seller carrybacks and assumption transactions. Rev. 500. Appraisal Contingency Notice. This form is used when the appraisal comes in at a lower amount. The buyer can elect to cancel the transaction or move forward with the transaction waiving the appraisal contingency. Rev. 0217. Buyer-Broker Exclusive Employment Agreement is a written contract between a buyer and a real estate broker that establishes an exclusive working relationship, much like a listing agreement does for sellers. It is used when a buyer wants professional representation in locating and purchasing a property, and it sets out the broker's duties, such as advising, searching for properties, and negotiating. The buyer's responsibilities, like working in good faith and providing financial qualifications, and how the broker will be compensated. The agreement ensures the broker is legally obligated to represent the buyer's best interests, clarifies how and when the broker is paid. Especially important if the seller or listing broker does not offer compensation, and protects both parties by defining the terms, exclusivity, and duration of their relationship. Rev. 08-2024. Buyer Contingency Addendum, to be used when the underlying purchase contract is to be contingent upon one of the following 2 scenarios. 1. The buyer accepting an offer to purchase his or her real property. Or 2. The closing of the buyer's property that is already under contract. Rev. 02-17. Buyer Pre-Closing Walkthrough. The form is intended to encourage buyers to conduct a pre-closing walkthrough of the premises to be purchased and document their findings in a manner easily conveyed to the seller. 02-17. Commercial Buyer's Inspection Notice and Seller's Response Form, BINSAR. This new Commercial Buyer's Inspection Notice and Seller's Response Form is designed for use with the AAR Commercial Purchase Contract. The form evidences that the buyer has completed and verified all desired due diligence and inspections, and the buyer has verified all important information. The form also evidences the buyer's election to accept the property in its present condition with no requested corrections or repairs, disapprove of the listed items and immediately cancel the contract, or provide the seller an opportunity to correct the listed disapproved items. ERO 210, Commercial Real Estate Purchase Contract, used in commercial industrial transactions and includes provisions for financing. Revener 503, Commercial Seller's Property Disclosure Statement, similar to the residential SPDS, designated for use with commercial industrial sales. Revemer 0208, Consent to Limited Representation, is signed by a specific buyer and a specific seller who are in a limited dual representation arrangement with a real estate agent firm. This form is referenced in the agency disclosure and election form and should not be used unless the property has been identified. Revener 1202, Counter Offer, used to make counter offers to initial purchase offers. Revener 0211, Cure Period Notice, used when a cure notice is required pursuant to the residential resale real estate purchase or vacant land purchase contract. Revener 209, Disclosure of Buyer Agency and Seller Waiver and Confirmation, designed for a buyer broker to present to a seller who is represented by a limited service company. This disclosure will inform the seller of the buyer agent's role in the transaction. Revener 805, Critical Date List, 2017. This form will help agents to keep track of the critical dates in the contract. Revener 0217, Domestic Water, Well Addendum, used to provide notice to the buyer that the buyer can expect to receive a domestic water well, use Addendum SPDS. Essentially, this language replaces language that used to be part of the residential purchase contract. Revener 1113, Domestic Water, Well Water Use Addendum. Seller's Property, Disclosure Statement, used in conjunction with the seller's property disclosure statement when the property is served by a water well. Revener 212, HOA Condominium Planned Community Addendum, disclosure to the buyer about what HOA information the buyer should receive by Arizona law and the timeframes in which the buyer has to reply. Revener 207, disclosure of information on lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards, sales, used to meet requirements for lead-based paint disclosure for residential sales. Revener 209, disclosure of information on lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards, rentals, used to meet requirements for lead-based paint disclosure for rental properties. Revener 0209, Loan Assumption Addendum, used when a buyer is assuming one or more loans that encumber a property being purchased. 0114, Loan Status Update, used to update all parties to a transaction of the status of the buyer's loan application. This form is available in fillable print format. Revener 217, Market Conditions Advisory. This form was developed to advise that the price a buyer is willing to pay and the price a seller is willing to accept for a specific property rests solely with the individuals involved in the transaction. EO8, EO9, Move In, Move Out Condition Checklist, to be filled out by the tenant and serves as notification to the tenant that the form is not a repair request. EO812, Multiple Counter Offer, used when making counter offers to multiple parties. Revener 0212, Multiple Offer to Counter Offer. This form essentially mirrors the Multiple Counter Offer form. This form is intended for use by buyers making offers on multiple properties. SO2 CAR 12, Mutual Cancellation of Property Management Agreement, to be used to help owners and property managers with a simple solution for navigating the termination of a property management agreement. Notice of 2-day access. Use this form to provide the tenant with at least 2 days. Notice that you, landlord, intend to enter the dwelling unit during reasonable hours to make repairs, conduct inspections, have services completed, or exhibit the dwelling unit to prospective purchasers and tenants. EO8 TACA 13, Notice of Abandonment, used to inform the tenant that the landlord considers the premises to be abandoned and provides a specific timeline and actions the landlord may take to regain possession of the premises. 8-13, Notice of Cancellation of Property Management Agreement, to be used as a simple solution to ensure that the proper notice is given to the landlord when canceling a property management agreement. 2.14. Notice of intention to terminate lease agreement. Due to non-payment of rent, this notice gives the tenant 5 days to pay the past due rent and applicable fees, or the lease will be terminated. Certified mail constitutes legal delivery of the notice. AAR 0812.